I mean, he has repeatedly made completely contradictory statements about his plans for this war and how long it will be. And every time he is asked which of his diametrically opposing statements is actually U.S. policy, he just shrugs his shoulders and says it's both.
You've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to last
both.
for?
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both.
It literally cannot be both, but it's always both, even though it logically cannot be. And this just keeps happening. I mean, every day we get a news statement that contradicts the last thing they said. For example, here was Secretary Hegseth during an interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday.
Well, we're not flying a mission accomplished banner like George W. Bush on an aircraft carrier. We're not doing that, and we haven't done that.
Okay, no mission accomplished banner for us. We're not doing that. We haven't done that. Well, Donald Trump didn't have a banner at his rally today in Kentucky, but he did say this.
Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Does it feel like we've won? Trump says we won. It was over in the first hour. That sounds pretty mission accomplished to me. All of this would be, well, concerning because he's the leader of the free world. Some of it is funny if the consequences weren't deadly serious. And I've thought about this all day today and who I really wanted to talk to today. I've talked to so many smart public officials who are doing everything they can to hold this administration accountable. We'll continue to do that. But tonight, I really want to spend some time with people who I have actually sat with in the Situation Room and who I know have spent hours in these rooms to just really help unpack everything that is happening and not hold back in any way. Michael McFaul is the former U.S. ambassador to Russia during the Obama administration. Ben Rhodes was deputy national security advisor to President Obama. There's always so much to say each of these days, of these last 12 days, that we have all been covering and talking about this war. And I'm going to try to get to all of it, but I hope you will bring up things that have struck out to you, too. Ben, just a couple of hours after Donald Trump said we won, we got some breaking news from Reuters. 3 sources familiar with the matter tell Reuters that U.S. intelligence indicates that Iran's leadership is still largely intact and is not at risk of collapse anytime soon. And this is just yet another one of these reports that we see every day where I think back to all of the hours you both, I spent some time in them, but you spent more time in them, spent in contingency meetings to discuss what would happen if you did things like struck Iran. And I just wonder, with that news and just everything you're seeing, kind of how you assess where we are at this moment.
I think where we are, Jen, is that Donald Trump wants this to play out like on his own terms, on his own timelines. And that's not at all what's happening in Iran. It's not what's happening in the region, and it's not what's happening around the world. And all of what's happening is predictable. I did sit in contingency meetings about this exact scenario, a war with Iran, over a decade ago, and all of these things would happen. So first of all, the Iranian regime is not one man. It's not the 86-year-old supreme leader. It is a deep and ideological machinery that cannot be destroyed in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of airstrikes. Full stop. The most heavily armed, there are millions of people under arms in the Iranian system. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is the most powerful force inside of Iran. They're the ones that are going to emerge in any kind of power vacuum. They have. They're the ones who are backing Ali Khamenei's son as the new supreme leader. They're not going to give up power. They're just not. And maybe Iran will fracture into some civil war, but they'll be fighting in that civil war. You've now had the war spread to over 10 countries in the region. Lebanon has nearly 1 million people displaced because of the Israeli bombardment there. Israelis are in bomb shelters. The Gulf has been devastated by strikes against not just military but civilian targets as well. The oil is not flowing through the Straits of Hormuz. 20% of the world's energy goes through there. So that's a global problem. Americans have spent over $10 billion. The economic cost to the world is probably tens and tens, if not over $100 billion. Donald Trump does not control these things. Israel has a vote. The Iranians have a vote. What other actors in the region do have a vote. So this thing is way beyond his control, and they're not going to achieve their objectives of replacing the Iranian regime or getting unconditional surrender. That's not going to happen in a 2 or 3 week air campaign.
One of the, as I just said, it seems like he thinks he can just shout things out and the world's going to follow. And that's not how things work, it's not how war works, not how anything works. Let me ask you, Ambassador McFaul, about one of the things, the pieces of news I just talked about that we learned today that isn't particularly surprising given all the details that were out there in public reporting, but just that the preliminary investigation into that strike on that school in Iran found the U.S. was likely responsible. And Trump basically said, and I just played this clip, he didn't know anything about it. I mean, I kind of said there's no president who wouldn't know anything about it. But put in play, I think this is being kind of brushed over a little bit, the significance of this type of civilian casualty. You've sat in a lot of these meetings. You've been in these conversations with presidents. Talk to us a little bit about this type of civilian casualty impact and what the typical conversation would be in a moment like this.
Well, of course, there would be an investigation. There would be a report. The president would be briefed every minute of the day on this. For the president that we all worked with, let's be clear about what you said earlier in the setup. It's absurd that he just shrugs and says, I don't know anything about that. Both worlds are bad, right? If he doesn't know anything about that, why is his team not briefing him? And if he does and he's lying about it, that's equally bad. But the second part, I just find it immoral, the way he talks about it. And I want to stress this. I'm so glad you're focused on this particular piece of this very complex war that we're in. We're just blowing over it like it doesn't matter to anybody. It matters to me. It matters to my friends. It matters to my Iranian American friends that I just celebrated Nowruz with last night, who cannot stand this regime. I want to make that clear. You can be totally against this horrible repressive regime and also be outraged by kids in their homeland being killed. And we don't seem like our president of the United States doesn't express any remorse at all. It is appalling, and it makes us look weak. It makes us look like other thugs in the world. Vladimir Putin talks this way. Why are we now, the United States of America, talking this way? I think it has really big long-term damage to our reputation that people in the White House are not thinking about.
Such an important point. The world sees it. Leaders in the region see it. Our allies see it. Partners see it. Adversaries see it. And they see the reaction and the flippancy through which the president is responding. Let me ask you, Ben, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. I tried to just do kind of a quick summary of that and the impact here. I mean, Trump is telling these shipping companies to have some guts. It seems pretty clear from what Senator Chris Murphy said and some reporting from within the White House that they didn't think this would be a real issue, that they didn't plan for it being shut down in this way. How do you see this? What do you think could happen? They obviously missed a lot here, but give us your assessment of that.
Well, again, in any conflict scenario with Iran, this is always something that you plan for. This is not a surprise at all. Again, so 20% of the world's energy flows through fossil fuel energy flows through the Straits of Hormuz. That's from Qatar, that's from the UAE, that's from Bahrain, that's from a number of these Gulf countries. And what the Iranians can do is a couple things. One is they can just kind of threaten to blow tankers out of the water, right? And maybe take out a couple. And we've seen reports that they have hit a number of tankers. And so therefore, the shipping companies, they don't want to do that. Understandably, they don't want to go through the straits if it's being targeted. Then what happens is you also have some of the producers say, well, we're going to turn off the production because we can't ship this out. So Qatar, for instance, has turned off one of the largest liquid natural gas fields in the world because they can't export their energy. Then the biggest problem that could happen that we've seen reports of in the last couple of days is Iran could lay mines in the Straits of Hormuz. So it's not even just that they're firing weapons. It said, if you're running a tanker through there, you don't know if you're going to hit a mine or not. And that could have devastating consequences, and already has, for the price of oil in the world. That's going to show up at the pump for Americans. By the way, let's be clear who this benefits. Mike's on with us. Vladimir Putin is going to make a lot more money, because already he's making more money on the oil that he is selling because the price of oil is higher. He's been given a waiver by the Trump administration to sell oil to India. And so he's making tons of money off of that. And in the long run, if we can't get this energy flowing, other countries, maybe even in Europe, might have to start buying Russian oil again. So this has all kinds of domino effects in terms of geopolitics. And I think another thing that people have to understand is if the war ended tomorrow, it would still take weeks to restart all that production, to restart that flow of ships through the Straits of Hormuz. If it is mined, it could take months, right? So this could be serious, devastating economic impacts to the global economy and to Americans paying higher prices. And the fact that they didn't think this through, that they're somehow surprised that something that anybody who's looked at a potential war with Iran knew the Iranians would do if they wanted to impose a cost on the rest of the world. And this is amateur hour. It's as Mike said, it's immoral that we have a commander-in-chief that doesn't care that. I want a commander-in-chief who cares about U.S. troops and Iranian school children, not just the price of oil, which Trump seems to be obsessed with. But he's obsessed with that without understanding that what he started is hurting Americans and hurting people around the world because of energy prices.
Also, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You can look at a map and see where the Strait of Hormuz is located.